Dear diary full of shit. Just play along with me, myself, and I. No one else. Yo, I'm so legit. Figured I'd make a quick audio presentation. My brother-in-law, I think, secretly is a closet queer and wants to suck my dick really, really bad. I've been meaning to. I've decided to put out this audio presentation, but haven't really been in any huge hurry to do it. But got the thumbnail there, solipsism, can't see past the end of your own nose. Um, it's a decent uh, wording along with it. I could, I decided to keep that just as whatever. He's not my cousin, but, whatever. Because he does things. My brother in law is the most petty, self centered, self righteous, arrogant piece of work I've ever encountered in my life. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, motherfucker this, bitch that, but I've mentioned him before a little bit in the past. He is like mentally off. Now, his upbringing, this is going to be kind of some stuff here. Now, when my sister and him were dating, my sister didn't talk about their dating antics or whatever, but occasionally it might just come up in passing. I guess his mom is kind of crazy. I think she was in the military, which shows you, that don't mean shit. Air Force, unless you're like the janitor or the garbage man, Navy, let me put it to you this way. Marines, the Army, not to besmirch the Army, but the Army, well, I was never in the service, but I'm just going to say it. The Army will pretty much take people that other people won't, other branches. I almost joined the Marines on a whim. I would have if I had a high school diploma. But they were like, no, we need that. Would have also gotten to the oil rig field if I had a high school diploma. Plus, they said they were going to invest like $50,000, and that was, you don't bet on this pony. But GEDs suck. You'd be better. Now, homeschooling, apparently they do have, so I've heard. I don't know if this is true or not. But they have, like, you can get a degree, like an actual, but you're still like, you'd have to pass the test. See, high school, you just go through high school, they hand you a diploma. As long as you got C's and B's, you don't have to remember shit or even know shit. You just walk across the thing with your diploma, that's it. To get a GED, the book is as big as an old school phone book for those of you who are old and shit. And you have to like pass that test. You have to prove that you actually know everything that was taught to you during that 4 years. So ironically, in my humble opinion, if you have a GED, you are smarter than someone with a high school diploma because you have to prove everything that you had to sit through over the past 4 years. Ain't that some shit? So anyway, just fuck that. But yeah, the guy was like, I don't mean no disrespect, but you might try the Army. They take a certain percentage of high school dropouts. So, I mean, like I said, it depends. At least get your foot in the door, right? Whatever. But I didn't want to join the Army, and I didn't want to join, any other branch because, I figured, well, the ASVAB or whatever aptitude test, I joined the Air Force, I'd be a fueler, or a tire changer, I mean, sure, I might, I'd get my benefits or whatever. I could say that I served my country and check yes, on the job applications, but just wasn't interested. Why I wanted to join the Marines? Well, I was going through a time in my life where I was kind of paranoid. Like I said, I was thinking about a permanent. Well, I don't want to get into that, especially since my fucking faggot ass brother-in-law is listening in. I've just had enough of his shit, which is kind of honestly why we didn't kind of got off on the wrong foot because I was kind of paranoid about him. They sent you to infiltrate my life, right? But anyway, turns out he's just some fucking nobody. But like I said, he was my sister's first child. They say, women marry their fathers. That couldn't be farther from the truth. So anyway, his mother's a quack. His dad was like a helicopter parent. I've talked about him. Just wasn't really involved in his life. It's just like, how are things going, son? Good. Okay. And that's like the extent of it. At least kind of based on what I can gather. I have met both of them very briefly. There you go. He grew up in a punk part of town, so that means he went to school with punks. He was friends with punks. His peers were punks. Be it in school for 6 or 7 hours a day, be it walking around at the mall. He was surrounded by low caliber people. Different areas of Colorado. I used to live in Thornton. There's a lot of punks in Thornton. The punk scale, is a little bit higher in where he grew up. Denver is worse too. But for some reason, it just is what it is. You're going to get punks anywhere, but not to sound all silly and shit, punks, but it's the truth. There are some bitch ass people walking around. But and it's a society thing. Generally, they're lower caliber people, but they are in character. But you can still get, you can be a hotshot booger snot and still be a bitch ass little punk. But anyway, my brother-in-law is the type of guy who would get in an argument with a 12-year-old with Down syndrome, best him barely, and that becomes a part of who he is. And it will be something that he holds near and dear to his heart for the rest of his life. That's what I mean when I say it becomes, it's like he chalks it up to, a win. He's just a little bit taller. He started out, however tall he is. He's just a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, than he was an hour ago, because he just bested some dude, 12-year-old kid with Down syndrome. Let's see, here's an example of things that just don't make sense to me. We were building it was my dad, my brother-in-law, and me. We were working on a treehouse for my nephews. Just helping out my dad. And it somehow became evident, like it became a competition with him of who could drive screws better. I swear to God, under the eyes of God and the devil, because they're both always watching, one of them's weighing in. I don't remember exactly how it came about, and I can't, explain. But somehow it was like, man, these screws, you kind of got to like press really hard or something, and otherwise it would mess up. So I take the screw gun and I just, and he's all, well, look at you, and it's like, you fuck. Are you a grown ass goddamn man, or are you 7? So anyway, that was shocking. And then the neighbor, and shit like this happens all the time. This is just like one example, okay? I can't remember all this shit. It's just, but it's just such a constant, and it doesn't make any sense. How a human being could be so petty and so like, he genuinely chalks it up as a win. It's like, you pathetic fool. He just doesn't get it. But, at some point, the monkey has to stop fucking the football. He's still humping that football, and he's, like, proud of it. He doesn't know that you're not supposed to go around, as a monkey fucking footballs. Grow up. But, let's see. And then the neighbor was firing off rubber banders. And we were talking about it, and like I said, I don't remember exactly how it played out, but I started talking a little bit more quiet because I didn't want the neighbor to hear me talking about him, because that's just rude. You're probably thinking for all my hate whores out there, well, why were you talking about him or them? I don't know. We were outside and somehow, the topic of rubber bands came up and he was sending them down range and I lowered my voice a little bit. And again, my brother-in-law took this as an opportunity to huff and puff, and I guess he figured, puss, what, you afraid to, talk in your normal voice? And pardon my enthusiasm, for someone like my brother-in-law, this would be a crumb. What, does it bother you? Not at all, little man. This is what I do. He's been a fan for a long time, and that's the thing. Secret fan, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you? Jesus Christ. Pardon the use of the Lord's name in vain, but stop fucking the football, walk away, grow up, be a man. Okay? I don't know what kind of father he is, whatever. I'm not going to talk about that. Seems like a decent enough guy. We seemed like we were on good terms for a long time, but it's like walking on eggshells. And he'd say the same thing, but it's like, I let it slide. It's like I just let, because that's how he does. He just sort of, he brings shit up just over and over and over. And it's like, why are you doing that? What are you trying to accomplish? And I suspect that in his pathetic world, he's trying to accomplish total and absolute dominance. That 12-year-old with Down syndrome didn't stand a fucking chance. And by God, by golly, if he ever encounters that 12-year-old with Down syndrome again, he's going to remind that son of a bitch who's boss. Like I said, what the fuck is wrong with this dude? I'm not going to call him a man. There's not many of those walking around these days. I don't consider myself a man. I don't. I know the playbook, but he doesn't. Most people don't. I actually do. But I don't actually consider myself a man. I'm a man boy. I can go through the motions. I know how to walk that walk and even talk that talk, but it's not really my state. You know what I mean? I'm more of a, pardon my enthusiasm. I make YouTube audio presentations, right? Real man wouldn't do that. Wouldn't waste his fucking time with it. And then the whole troll thing. Got this harem of hoes. You ever seen that guy, Scotty Kilmer? He's like a car dude. He laughs like that. He'll be talking. I subscribed to him several years ago. I haven't listened to him in a while, but I know I'm digressing, but he just sort of does that every now and then. Like I said, I live beside myself, so. Anyway, talk's kind of weird. A Honda Civic is, by some people's standards, is the crappiest car on earth, but a Toyota Camry, on the other hand, those good. You take care of those, it'll last forever. Oil change every 3,000 miles, you're good to go. But anyway, check them out if you want to. But I know my brother-in-law well. Next time I see him, he'll probably be like, oil change, just whatever. He'll bring it up. My car needs an oil change. It's like, okay, what's your point? What's your point, big man? What is your point? What are you doing? I get it. You want to suck my dick. Like, fuck. Damn near, cartwheel, over the opportunity. Holy shit. But, you know what I mean? The dude is just, what's the word? He is on the hook. He is not in control of his emotions. Like I said, his ego. I'm not going to say pride, just ego. He's got the world's biggest microscopic ego. It's just fucking pathetic. He is a sorry, pitiful human being. So, and, like I said, I have to play nice, but I've kind of started not. I started doing shit, like our last encounter, I said some shit. Because like I said, I treat him with such kid gloves, it's unbelievable. And he's just such a child. But anyway, so I digress. So he started going, doing the disguised shit talk thing. So he started like making noises. I shit you not. He was like, pew, 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 because fuck, it's just what he does. He'll hear something, you'll say something, And just eavesdropping, you know, it's not even like he's a part of the conversation. He's not even directly affected by it. But again, you know, I could say something like, you know, the reason this hose is this wide is so you can get, you know, more water flow through it, you know, and later, you know, it could be later that day or, you know, a month later or 5 years later, you know, he'll bring up something about hoses and water flow. And God, I wish I could think of an example. But anyway, that's that. So, um, and it's tough because it's always, you know, like if I ever catch him and he pulls shit like that, and where, because I talked to him in the garage one time. I pulled him aside and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm like, what's the deal, you know, with us? And I just like this, he was like, I ain't got no problem. Everything's cool, man, and all this, that, and the other. And just fuck you, you know. But, um, but yeah, I'm kind of tired of playing nice. And if he ever pulls that shit, and if he's listening right now, I'm not going to talk to him directly because that's stupid. But if he ever pulls that shit, I will call him on it. You know, and he's the father, you know, of, you know, my sister's kids, you know, my nephew. So I don't want to like break his spirit or anything. And I wouldn't do anything to embarrass him in front of his, you know, everybody. But he's just making it kind of impossible. So, and he doesn't know it, but I will chop his legs out from under him so goddamn fast. He'll hit that ground so hard, you know, knock the wind out of him, get up, and it's just all that ego and piss and vinegar and, you know, thinks he is and this, all that, and the other, be gone. And he will think, he will look at me and he will think of me and he will feel differently about me every time he's around me. Okay? I'm not trying to sound like a tough guy or a rough guy, but, you know, I kind of encounter this from time to time. You know, cowards trying to be, you know, covert, and I'll give you a little bit of room, but then, you know, when I call you out, that is the hill I will die on. I will destroy you. So now you got to be careful with shit like that. You know, you don't want to get, you know, killed. You know, someone pulls a weapon or getting in a fight. You know, somebody hits the ground, you know, with their head, and then you just killed somebody. You know, you want to be careful with that tough guy. You know, taking it all the way shit. You know, but you know, you're just today, in fact, as a matter of fact, which is not why I decided. Actually, yes, that is. Yeah, I guess that's what kicked that off. What made me decide to do this. This fucker decided to pull some shit. His wife was there. She's like a good Christian girl. Um, I let that slide. It was a pretty minor thing, but the fucker did it again. You know, you give a rat a crumb, you know, they'll present to you not only a cake, but a space shuttle, a city center, you know, a tree, just all kinds of shit. So I, you know, called him out quietly, but I said loud enough where everybody could hear. His wife, another family member of his, and somebody else who was in there, a vendor delivering shit. You know, I said, life's full of choice. Well, anyway, I said, life's full of choices, you hate whore. And then I said, you fucking coward. They always are. And I didn't say it like super loud, but I said it where everybody, and I knew, I thought, let's see how, because his wife, for some reason, like knows my name, you know, pretty sure she desperately wants to have sex with me. So I thought, well, you know what? And I should have called him out the first time, you know, and I thought about driving by and the garage door was open a little bit and saying, you know, keep what you bring to the table, you piece of shit. Honestly. And in hindsight, that's what I should have said because it's a little less hostile instead of life's full of choices, you hate whore. You know? But it, you know, kind of caught me off guard, I guess, you know, so I just sort of went for that. But yeah, didn't say anything, didn't look at me, you know, didn't do nothing. But you could tell his wife was kind of like all huffy puffy, and it's like, you fucking cunt. So anyway, not to sound like I'm 10 foot tall, I'm a very, you know, patient and forgiving guy. But you can only be so forgiving Otherwise, it will be taken as weakness. You have to stand your ground, and you have to know the difference. You know, like even if it doesn't bother you, you still have to let them know, hey, mind your manners. You know, and it doesn't matter if you'll never see him again. It's part of being human. No, I'm not going to let you disrespect me. You know, but my brother-in-law, I see him all the fucking time. So, and I'm getting tired of it. And I really, really don't want to do that. But if he's listening, you will lose, and you will lose absolute and 100%. And you have to see me a lot. Well, not a lot, you know. So let's grow up. I'd say man up, but that's not who he is. So, I guess that is all I gotta say, baby. See you soon, bro. Fucking prick.